I want you to imagine, just for a moment, spending years, decades, even fighting this massive legal battle against a huge institution. Imagine carrying a fight so long it starts to shape the very contours of your life.
Right? Decades spent pushing against an institution that never tires, while your own strength slowly, inevitably does. That's the human cost buried beneath the legal filings. A lifetime spent proving a truth that should never have needed defending.
Right, exactly. You've been patient, resilient, and then finally the news arrives. You actually get a ruling in your favor from the Supreme Court.
Victory. Best feeling in the world, right?
You'd think so. The highest court in the land says you were right, so you're expecting a payout. Something that will make your life, especially your retirement, just a little bit easier.
Totally.
But then you check your bank account, and almost all of that money has just vanished in this bizarre accounting twist.
Yeah, it's wild. And this isn't some hypothetical scenario for us to just ponder.
No, not at all. This is exactly what happened to Harjit Singh. He's an 87-year-old retired bank officer. And today, the mission of this deep dive is to trace the timeline of his fight for survival.
We're looking at a very specific rejoinder document, right?
We are. This podcast is an addendum to our podcast from yesterday titled 87-year-old bank retiree takes on PNB and RBI ombudsman. It details his battle against the Punjab National Bank and the Reserve Bank of India ombudsman.
We want to unpack the initial calculation errors, this seemingly unfair recovery process, and the ultimate financial struggle of an 87-year-old retiree trying to navigate bureaucratic math. It's a lot to untangle, and it's inherently unfair.
It really is. It's like finally winning a marathon, but right at the finish line, the organizers hand you the gold medal and then immediately charge you a medal holding fee that costs exactly as much as your prize money.
That is a surprisingly accurate analogy for what happened here.
So let's get into it. To understand Harjit Singh's grievance, we really have to go back to the origin, right? The exact moment of his retirement.
Yeah, we have to look at the foundational math of his pension.
Right, let's do that.
There's an initial assumption that the core issue was an incorrectly availed commutation.
Right, I saw that in the documents.
But that wasn't it. The problem was a fundamental miscalculation of his pension at the time of retirement. It all comes down to something called the dearness allowance or DA merger point.
Okay, I have seen that term scattered all over these sources. Before we get into what went wrong, we should probably establish what a dearness allowance actually is. Because, it sounds like a very uniquely specific banking term.
It is. It's a critical component of the Indian banking and government salary structure. Basically, a dearness allowance is an inflation adjustment.
Got it. Like keeping up with the cost of living.
Exactly. The word dearness refers to things becoming more dear or expensive. Inflation constantly eats away at the purchasing power of a fixed salary. So the DA acts as this dynamic bonus that rises as inflation goes up,
Ensuring you can still buy groceries despite year on year inflationary trends.
right? But the grievance specifically focuses on a merger point. Periodically, the banking system takes a chunk of that fluctuating inflation bonus and permanently bakes it into the base pay.
Okay, so they freeze it.
Yeah, that specific moment, the index number where they lock that allowance into the base salary is the merger point. When Harjit Singh retired, the bank calculated his pension using a DA merger point of 1616 points.
And I'm guessing that wasn't the right number.
No, it wasn't. The correct number legally should have been 1684 points.
Wait, so this isn't just a tiny typo? The bank basically used the wrong, base multiplier for his entire retirement package. Doesn't a difference of just 68 points cascade into a massive financial shortfall over the course of decades?
It absolutely does. It is far from a minor typo. Pension calculations aren't just flat sums. They are complex formulas built entirely on that initial foundation.
Like pouring a concrete foundation just an inch too narrow?
Yeah. By the time you build up to the third floor, nothing aligns and your building is leaning 5% dangerously from the vertical. Similarly, if that base definition is artificially depressed even by just 68 points, every single calculation that follows is compromised.
So his monthly pension is lower, his benefits are lower, and the adverse impact is compounded year on year.
Everything. Apply that suppressed baseline across 12 months a year for 20 years of retirement, and that 68-point difference compounds into a massive sum.
Right. And this wasn't just Harjit Singh, right?
No, this 1616 versus 1684 discrepancy affected an entire generation of banking professionals. This specific discrepancy was the focal point of a massive landmark legal battle.
The Bank of Baroda versus G. Palani case.
That's the one. It involved bank officers who retired or died between April 1st, 1998 and October 31st, 2002.
Why that specific window? What was happening then?
It was a timeline of shifting regulations. There was a 1999 joint note, which was an industry wide agreement on pay scales, followed by a 2003 amendment to pension regulations.
So a transitional period.
Exactly. The entire dispute centered on the very definition of pay for pension calculations during that transition. The banks interpreted the rules to use the lower 1616 point index. The retirees argued for the higher 1684 point index.
Which, makes sense. Let's fast forward a bit. So we have this massive legal battle over these 68 points. How did the courts handle this?
Well, fast forward to February 13, 2018. The Supreme Court of India issues its judgment in the G. Palani case.
And they rule for the retirees?
Yes, decisively. Under paragraph 34 of the ruling, the court gives a very clear directive. Banks must recalculate the pension and commutation area. They are ordered to pay the difference amount to the retirees.
And there was something about interest too, right?
Crucially, yes, the Supreme Court didn't just order the difference to be paid. They ordered it to be paid along with 9% interest.
Right, to compensate for the years of underpayment?
Exactly. You can't just hand back the principal 15 years later. The interest is reparative. It's meant to make them whole.
Okay, so the Supreme Court steps in, acknowledges the 1684 point standard, and orders the arrears paid with 9% interest. That sounds like a total unequivocal victory for a Harjit Singh.
It really does.
So how on earth does this turn into a grievance?
Well, this is where we see the dangerous gap between a Supreme Court directive and a bank's internal accounting execution.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, following the recalculation, Harjit Singh was supposed to be paid a total amount of Rs 1.38 lakhs.
Okay, that's the difference he's owed.
Right? But the bank didn't simply cut him a check for that amount.
Why not? The court told them to.
Well, while making the payment, the bank resorted to a lump sum backdated recovery of the difference amount of his commutation arrear.
Wait, commutation. Let's quickly define that for the listener, just so we're all on the same page.
Sure. Commutation is an option where a retiree can take a portion of their monthly pension as an upfront lump sum payment at the very beginning of their retirement.
Like an advance on your own future pension.
Exactly. And in exchange, your monthly checks are reduced for a set number of years to pay it back. So when he retired, he took a commutation based on that flawed 1616 point math.
Okay, I follow.
When the bank ran the new numbers with the correct one cited 84 points, they said, oh, your base pay was higher. So the formula for your lump sum advance should have been different.
So instead of just paying him the Rs 1.38 lakhs in pension arrears,
they executed a lump sum backdated recovery of that newly calculated commutation difference. It's a concept known as netting.
Netting. Okay, but wait, here's the catch that completely blew my mind when looking at the sources. The most shocking part isn't just the recovery itself, is it?
No, it's not.
It's that the bank charged Harjit Singh 9% interest on their recovery of the principal amount.
Yes, they weaponized the interest rate.
Let me get this straight. That is like returning a defective TV. The store agrees they owe you 1,000, but then they charge you a retroactive $900 handling fee with interest because they kept your TV for so long. They used the court's 9% interest mandate as a weapon against him.
That is a phenomenal way to put it. They took the reparative mandate of the Supreme Court, which was designed to punish the bank for its delay, and flipped it to punish Harjit Singh.
That is just infuriating. So let's shift to the real-world impact of these institutional accounting practices on an 87-year-old man. What is the final math here?
The final math is devastating. Because of this netting practice, the bank recovered Rs 1.25 lakhs out of the Rs 1.38 lakhs he was originally owed.
You've got to be kidding me. Out of a massive Supreme Court victory, only Rs 13,000 actually made it into Harjit Singh's savings bank account.
Not kidding. Harjit's net compensation was 13,000 rupees. The Rejoinder argues that this action is in direct contravention of commutation guidelines.
I would think so.
But more importantly, it completely violates the spirit of the Supreme Court judgment. In the Palani case, the court intended to make retirees whole, not penalize them.
Right. The court said you owe him. And the bank's accounting software essentially said, actually, let's call it even.
It's a perfect example of how a massive institution can adhere to the absolute mechanical letter of a financial process like netting accounts while entirely ignoring the judicial intent of a ruling.
They didn't defy the Supreme Court by refusing to run the numbers.
No, they ran them. They just used the architecture of their own ledgers to effectively neutralize the mandate.
It just reveals this terrifying vulnerability you fight for decades, starting from this initial DA merger point error, the 1616 instead of 1684.
Right.
You take it all the way to a 2018 Supreme Court Palani victory, and it ends with this devastating Rs 125 lakh recovery against Harjit Singh that leaves him with a mere 13,000 rupees restitution instead of 138 lakh.
Winning the legal argument really is only half the battle.
Exactly. I really want you, the listener, to reflect on how vulnerable individuals are when dealing with these massive institutional accounting systems. Even when you win in the highest court in the land, the battle isn't over if the losing party controls the calculator.
And it leaves you with a really lingering question to ponder. When the systems meant to deliver justice are the same ones executing the payout, who polices the math? Does a legal victory truly matter if institutional bureaucracy can just net away your justice?
Unbelievable. Something to really think about next time you see a headline about a massive court victory.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't done so already, please like, comment, subscribe, and share on social media platforms like Facebook, TikTok, etc. Until next time.